In this episode, we dive into the most horrifying snake attacks. From a retired Navy SEAL who turned into snake food while meditating, to a researcher who got bitten twice by a deadly black mamba. It was June 22nd, 2017. The Florida humidity hung heavy as the sun rose over suburban Gainesville. Inside a converted two-car garage on Maple Street, Brent Lively moved methodically through his morning routine, surrounded by the carefully controlled environment he had created for some of the world's most dangerous reptiles. Brent was a 34-year-old who had earned legendary status in Florida's exotic reptile community, not just for his extensive collection, but for his brazen handling methods that made seasoned herpetologists cringe. His social media accounts were filled with videos of him free-handling venomous snakes, delivering impromptu educational lectures, while timber rattlesnakes coiled inches from his bare feet. His followers numbered about 3,000. Drawn to his charismatic confidence and apparent fearlessness around creatures that could kill with a single bite, Brent held a Class II permit for venomous reptiles, which legally allowed him to maintain his collection, but he was notorious throughout the community for bypassing basic safety protocols. While other handlers used hooks, tubes, and protective equipment, Brent preferred direct contact, believing his experience and intuition provided better protection than mechanical barriers. His garage was a high-end serpentarium with climate-controlled enclosures and labeled racks holding snakes from around the world. Its most dangerous resident was Krishna, a 13-foot king cobra from Thailand, strong, alert, and notoriously unpredictable. King cobras are not true cobras but belong to their own genus, Ophiophagous, which literally means snake eater. They are the world's longest venomous snakes, capable of growing over 18 feet in length, and possess a level of intelligence that sets them apart from other serpents. Unlike many venomous species that strike and retreat, king cobras are aggressive defenders of their territory, capable of sustained attacks and multiple envenomations. On the morning of June 22nd, Brent began his routine cage maintenance, a process that required relocating Krishna to a freshly cleaned glass enclosure. Standard protocol uses a hook to guide the snake into a secure tube before transfer, minimizing contact and reducing strike risk. But Brent had always prided himself on his unconventional methods. Instead of using proper equipment, he reached directly into Krishna's enclosure, intending to lift the massive cobra by grasping it just behind the head, a technique he had demonstrated countless times in his social media videos. This time, however, Krishna was not in the cooperative mood. The king cobra, sensing the approaching hand as a threat to its territory, recoiled with lightning speed and struck Brent's wrist with surgical precision. The bite occurred just above his glove line, where a gap in his minimal protective gear left bare skin exposed. The half-inch fangs injected neurotoxic venom directly into Brent's bloodstream. Unlike tissue-destroying venoms, king cobra venom shuts down the nervous system by blocking signals between nerves and muscles. Surveillance footage later reviewed by authorities captured Brent's reaction with chilling clarity. Rather than panic or immediately seek professional medical help, he grimaced briefly, then walked calmly to his back room where he kept emergency supplies. Brent grabbed a vial of Thai anti-venom meant for king cobras, and without training or proper tools, tried to inject it himself. Anti-venom requires precise dosing and monitoring, even in hospitals. Brent's attempt was not only ineffective, but risked severe allergic reactions that could worsen the envenomation. As the venom took hold, Brent sat in his chair, vision blurring and fingers falling from paralysis. He tried to send a final message, but it was never completed. 3 weeks later, a FedEx driver making his regular delivery noticed packages piling up by Brent's front door, an unusual sight for someone who regularly received reptile supplies and equipment. A strong, unpleasant odor emanating from the house prompted the driver to contact authorities. Brent's funeral was held quietly by a small circle of family members who had long distanced themselves from his snake-keeping lifestyle. His remains were cremated and no formal obituary was published. Following the incident, Florida Fish and Wildlife officials conducted a full inspection of the property and revoked Brent's venomous reptile license. The case prompted legislative proposals to tighten private ownership regulations for high-risk exotic species. It was August 3, 2015, late afternoon, when Marcus Leventhal made his final jump into the flooded drainage canal in western Florida. The 15-year-old high school sophomore had been seen earlier that day by a neighbor running shirtless along the concrete embankment behind an abandoned housing development. He laughed loudly and jumped into the murky, debris-filled water. It would be the last time anyone saw Marcus alive. Marcus was known throughout his neighborhood for his reckless curiosity and insatiable appetite for danger. His friends and family noted a pattern of increasingly risky behavior, trespassing in storm drains, exploring abandoned buildings, and handling venomous snakes with casual confidence. He had been raised with little supervision. His father worked long shifts as a tow truck operator, and his mother had moved out years earlier. With no clear boundaries and few consequences, Marcus learned to see rules as suggestions and danger as a challenge, not a warning. The summer of 2015 hit South Florida hard. Hurricane Debbie caused widespread flooding that overwhelmed several illegal exotic animal breeders near Weston, allowing dozens of non-native species to escape. Among them were Burmese pythons bred for the pet trade. Wildlife officials have been tracking the predators for months, but the region's canals and drainage systems made containment nearly impossible. Burmese pythons are among the world's largest snakes, with specimens regularly exceeding 20 feet in length and weighing over 200 pounds. These massive constrictors possess incredible strength. Their muscular coils can exert pressure of up to 90 pounds per square inch, enough to stop blood flow and cause cardiac arrest in prey within minutes. The drainage canal where Marcus chose to swim that day had been transformed by recent rains into a perfect hunting ground for displaced predators. The water was high, murky, and filled with organic debris that provided ideal camouflage for ambush hunters. Palm fronds, construction materials, and storm runoff had created a maze of hiding spots where a large python could remain completely concealed while waiting for prey to venture within striking distance. Marcus had arrived at the canal alone that afternoon, ignoring frantic texts from friends who had planned to join him but were prevented by family obligations. His phone, wallet, and discarded shirt were later found wedged under a drainage grate, suggesting he had prepared for an extended swimming session in the contaminated water. Witnesses reported seeing him dive repeatedly, apparently searching for something beneath the surface, behavior that would have created the perfect opportunity for a python lying in wait among the submerged debris. Investigators believe the attack occurred in the knee-deep reeds near the canal's edge, where Marcus may have been diving or wading when the python struck. The snake likely mistook the splashing teenager for natural prey, wild pigs, deer, or large birds that frequently visit water sources in South Florida. The strike would have been sudden and violent. Pythons bite first to anchor their grip, then coil with explosive force, crushing the chest and cutting off blood flow within seconds. As Marcus struggled, every exhale allowed the coils to tighten further, collapsing his lungs and halting circulation. Death usually comes in under a minute, not from the bite, but from the sheer mechanical pressure of being slowly crushed alive. There were no signs of a fight, no defensive wounds, no screams. The ambush likely left him stunned and helpless as the snake finished its work. In the thick brown water surrounded by reeds and garbage, the scene was hidden from view. By the time anyone might have passed by, there was nothing left to hear or see. Just silence, and the slow drag of something heavy slipping below the surface. When Marcus failed to return home, his parents alerted authorities and search teams began combing the canal. But the murky, debris-filled water made recovery efforts nearly impossible. 2 days later, licensed python trapper Jorge Rivas spotted a bloated 13-foot Burmese python downstream. coiled beneath a leaning tree and showing signs of a recent large meal. He euthanized the snake and, during dissection, discovered the partially digested remains of Marcus, still identifiable by a skate park wristband. Forensics confirmed he had been swallowed whole, likely within hours of the attack, with dental records and personal items proving final confirmation. Marcus's death prompted immediate action from local authorities, who issued renewed warnings about post-storm wildlife hazards, particularly in neighborhoods adjacent to canal systems. A temporary fencing program was implemented near known drainage routes, and wildlife officials intensified their efforts to locate and remove escaped exotic species from suburban areas. Marcus was buried 3 days later in a quiet service attended by classmates, teachers, and extended family. His casket was closed, and grief counselors were brought into his school the following week to help students process the sudden, violent loss. It was November 8, 2020. Local resident Tommy Raskin prepared for what he called the Big One, a live stream featuring his 18-foot reticulated python, Cleo, in Kissimmee, Florida, a home to a thriving exotic pet community despite strict regulations. Tommy, age 32, grew up in Central Florida where he developed an early fascination with reptiles, spending countless hours at local nature centers and reptile expos. After high school, he worked various low-wage jobs but never pursued higher education or formal training in herpetology. His modest YouTube channel, focused almost exclusively on his reticulated python Cleo, reflected years of self-taught knowledge, though experts often criticized his handling techniques as risky and unprofessional. He was no celebrity. With fewer than 800 YouTube subscribers, he posted videos of Cleo slithering across his arms or feeding on thawed rabbits. By day, he drove for Uber and stocked shelves at a pet store. He lived alone, his social circle limited to online forums and reptile expos. His modest house was quiet except for his collection: several lizards, a small caiman, and Cleo, whom he considered special. He had acquired Cleo 4 years earlier when she was barely 2 feet long. He raised her methodically, with feeding schedules charted on a whiteboard and humidity levels recorded in spreadsheets. As she grew, his content began to revolve solely around her. Friends stopped calling. His sister blocked him after he missed her wedding to medicate Cleo. But Tommy didn't care. He believed he was proving that reptiles weren't just dumb killers. That fateful evening, Tommy prepared his camera for a live stream that would change everything. His plan was absurdly simple: lie shirtless on the floor, cover himself in rabbit scent, and record Cleo's reaction. He titled it, "What Happens If I Pretend to Be Prey?" Several subscribers urged him not to do it. One warned that pythons don't think the way humans hope, but Tommy, ever confident, insisted Cleo had never bitten him. After months of planning for this viral moment, Tommy couldn't contain his excitement. He took a thawed rabbit and rubbed its scent across his bare chest and arms as viewers began joining the stream. He positioned himself on the floor of the enclosure, smiling at the camera. As comments poured in, he drifted further into his fantasy, ignoring the danger lurking in the corner. Reticulated pythons are ambush predators, especially when presented with prey-scented, warm bodies. Pythons don't attack out of malice. They attack because millions of years of evolution had programmed them to associate those specific stimuli with food. A snake doesn't recognize your history together, your voice, or your intentions. It only recognizes feeding cues and threat cues. And a warm body covered in prey scent will always register as a feeding opportunity. Cleo approached slowly, tasting the air with her tongue. The smell drew her closer to Tommy, who lay peacefully on the floor. She raised her head, muscles tensed and ready. With lightning speed, she struck, wrapping her massive coils around his torso. He gasped in pain, trying to free himself as the snake constricted tighter with each exhaled breath. Viewers frantically typed warnings in the chat. They pleaded for someone to call 911, desperately trying to identify his location. By the time authorities forced their way into Tommy's home nearly an hour later, they found Cleo midway through consuming him. Her jaws stretched impossibly wide around his upper torso, slick with saliva. His legs were motionless, already halfway engulfed, and the pressure of her muscular coils had long since stopped his heart. Circulation to his brain had been cut off within minutes, and his internal organs were compressed beyond recovery. What was supposed to be a breakthrough viral video had turned into the most grotesque python attack in Florida's exotic pet history. The massive reticulated python that ended the 32-year-old's life remains housed at a secure facility, a living reminder of what happens when humans forget the untamed nature of apex predators. In the weeks that followed, Tommy's channel didn't go viral, it curdled. Viewers who once cheered his confidence now picked apart every interaction with Cleo, replaying moments where the warning signs flickered like static behind a smile. One clip showed her coiled loosely around his shoulders as he read fan comments aloud. Another caught her tightening on his wrist for a breath too long. He always laughed and would say that she was just feeling cuddly. Animal control removed her that same evening. She was deemed non-releasable and transferred to a private reptile facility where she remains in solitary containment. No name on her enclosure, just a cage, a heat lamp, and silence. It was March 2023. The morning mist hung heavy over the West Sulawesi forest, and Frank and Mary Holloway had set out for an early morning hike from their homestay on the edge of the forest. Frank Holloway was a 67-year-old retired Navy officer from San Diego, California. His wife Mary, 65, was a former nurse. Their social media accounts indicated they had been traveling through Southeast Asia for 3 months, visiting Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia before arriving in Indonesia. What the couple likely didn't fully appreciate was the ancient predator that called these forests home. Reticulated pythons are among the world's longest snakes, with specimens regularly exceeding 20 feet in length. These massive constrictors can weigh over 200 pounds and possess incredible strength. Their muscular coils can exert pressure of up to 90 pounds per square inch, enough to stop blood flow and cause cardiac arrest in prey within minutes. Unlike venomous snakes, pythons kill through constriction, tightening their grip with each exhale of their victim until asphyxiation occurs. Their homestay owner, a man named Pak Dharma, had warned them about venturing into the forest alone. He spoke of many dangers dwelling there, which Frank had interpreted metaphorically rather than as the practical warning it was intended to be. When Frank announced his intention to hike at dawn, Pak Dharma had frowned but merely suggested they stick to the marked paths and not go alone. That morning, they set out just as the sky began to lighten, following a narrow trail that wound deeper into the forest than they had ventured before. Frank walked ahead. Mary followed a few paces behind, her phone ready to capture photographs of the exotic flora and fauna they encountered. An hour into their hike, they reached a small clearing where sunlight streamed through a break in the canopy. Frank decided it was the perfect spot for morning meditation. Mary found a fallen log to sit on while Frank settled on a patch of moss. As Frank meditated, Mary decided to explore the immediate area, staying within earshot but wanting to photograph some unusual flowers she had spotted. After about 15 minutes of photography, Mary heard a strange sound, something between a grunt and a gasp. Concerned, she hurried back toward the clearing. What she found would haunt her for the rest of her life. Frank was no longer sitting in meditation. Instead, he was on the ground, his body partially wrapped in the massive coils of a reticulated python. The snake, at least 18 feet long, had already constricted around Frank's chest and legs. His face was turning blue, his eyes bulging as he struggled weakly against the powerful reptile. Mary screamed and rushed forward, grabbing a fallen branch to strike at the snake. Her hands trembled, and she managed to take a blurry photo with her phone before dropping it to use both hands to fight the python. Despite Mary's desperate efforts to save her husband, the python's grip only tightened. With each breath Frank exhaled, the snake's coils constricted further, a hunting technique perfected over millions of years. Unlike mammalian predators that kill with teeth and claws, pythons are patient killers, using their incredible muscular strength to slowly squeeze the life from their prey. The pressure exerted is so precise that it prevents the lungs from expanding while simultaneously cutting off blood flow to the brain and heart. Within minutes, Frank had lost consciousness from asphyxiation. Mary, exhausted and hysterical, ran back toward the homestay to get help, getting lost several times in her panic before finally stumbling onto the main trail. By the time she returned with Pac Dharma and several local men, Frank had been dead for over an hour. The python had begun the process of consuming him, having dislocated its jaws to work over his head and shoulders. The sight was so horrific that Mary collapsed, requiring medical attention herself. The locals, familiar with python behavior, knew that once a python this size had begun to consume prey, it becomes vulnerable and sluggish. They were able to kill the snake and extract Frank's body, though the trauma to his upper body was severe. The incident made international headlines, particularly after a local villager recorded video of the python being cut open to remove Frank's remains. While python attacks on humans are rare, they are not unprecedented in this region. Local authorities noted that deforestation had pushed these massive predators closer to human settlements, increasing the likelihood of such encounters. Mary Holloway returned to the United States with her husband's remains, devastated by the loss and traumatized by what she had witnessed. In a brief statement through family members, she urged travelers to respect local warnings about wildlife dangers and never to venture into unfamiliar wilderness without proper guides. On a warm evening in July 2019, as the Florida sun began to set over Ocala, Laura Benwick prepared for what would be her final interaction with her beloved reptile collection. The 37-year-old exotic pet enthusiast moved through her modest home, which had long ago been transformed into what she proudly called her serpent sanctuary. Laura had built a reputation among local exotic pet enthusiasts as the woman who could handle anything with scales. Her fascination with reptiles began in childhood when her father, a wildlife biologist, would take her on expeditions into the Everglades. By her 30s, what started as a hobby had evolved into an obsession that consumed her life, her savings, and eventually her marriage. Laura's home housed over 20 snakes ranging from harmless corn snakes to deadly venomous species that required special permits that Laura didn't bother to obtain. Her neighbors had filed numerous complaints about her collection, particularly after 2 separate escape incidents in 2018. Yet she continued to ignore such hazards, and living in a very rural area, no authorities prioritized her neighbors' concerns. On that fateful evening, Laura was preparing to clean the enclosure of her prized possession, a monocled cobra she had illegally purchased through an underground exotic pet network. She'd named him King, and often boasted about his perfect hood pattern and aggressive striking behavior. Her usual snake-handling assistant had canceled at the last minute, but Laura had decided to proceed with the cleaning anyway, skipping her protective gloves since there hadn't been any incident prior to this moment. As Laura opened the enclosure, King was unusually active, swaying back and forth with his hood fully expanded, a warning sign that Laura either missed or chose to ignore. Unlike many snakes that flee from confrontation, the monocled cobra actively stands its ground when threatened, capable of delivering enough neurotoxic venom in a single bite to kill 20 adults. She reached in with a hook to move him to a temporary container, but King was faster. In a flash of movement, the cobra struck, sinking its fangs deep into the flesh between her thumb and index finger. At first, Laura remained calm. She secured King back in his enclosure and called 911. But within minutes, her speech began to slur as the neurotoxins attacked her nervous system. By the time EMTs arrived, Laura was deteriorating rapidly. Without immediate access to the specific anti-venom needed, the medical team could only provide supportive care. Laura died in the intensive care unit just hours after the bite, her body succumbing to respiratory failure as the powerful neurotoxins paralyzed her diaphragm. The morning of May 14, 2022 began with heavy rain pounding the windows of Devon Blakely's suburban home on Australia's Gold Coast. The 29-year-old exotic snake owner had planned to spend the day maintaining his collection, a hobby that consumed his life for the past 7 years. Devon was known throughout the reptile enthusiast community for his extensive knowledge and growing collection of venomous species. Friends described him as meticulous about safety, always emphasizing proper handling techniques to fellow collectors. His pride and joy was a room specifically converted for housing his collection, a temperature-controlled space with reinforced doors and specialized enclosures for over a dozen venomous snakes. Among them was his newest acquisition, an inland taipan. The inland taipan possesses venom 50 times more toxic than that of a cobra. A single bite contains enough venom to kill 100 adult humans, with its cocktail of neurotoxins, hemotoxins, and myotoxins attacking multiple body systems simultaneously. In the wild, these snakes are actually shy and reclusive, rarely encountering humans in their remote desert habitat. His girlfriend always worried that he may go too far with his collection, but she couldn't stop him, eventually letting him have his freedom in these animals. She convinced herself that Devon was experienced enough to know how to handle these reptiles. Devon had been waiting for months for the proper permits to keep this particular species, and he had only received the snake 2 weeks prior. The inland taipan, also known as the fierce snake, was paradoxically known for its shy, reclusive nature in the wild. Despite possessing the world's most potent venom, these snakes rarely encountered humans in their remote desert habitat in central East Australia. Obtaining the proper permits for keeping such a dangerous species had been a bureaucratic nightmare. Devon had completed specialized handling courses, installed additional security measures, and submitted to regular inspections. The final piece, a supply of specific taipan antivenom to keep on site, was still caught in red tape. The Wildlife Authority had promised it would be delivered within the week, but Devon couldn't wait to begin working with his new prize. That rainy Saturday morning, Devon's girlfriend went grocery shopping while he went on with cleaning the snake enclosure. Devon entered his snake room to perform routine maintenance. He was particularly careful with the taipan enclosure, using a snake hook as he'd done countless times before. But professional handlers know that taipans should never be manipulated with hooks alone. The proper procedure involves guiding them into clear tubes where they can be safely contained without directly handling. But Devon, perhaps overconfident from his years of experience with other species, attempted to guide the taipan with just his hook. He carefully opened the enclosure, snake hook in his right hand, clear acrylic shield in his left, standard safety protocol. The taipan was hiding in its favorite spot, beneath a small artificial cave. Devon gently touched the snake's midsection with his hook, intending to guide it into the temporary container. The taipan, however, had other ideas. With the explosive speed characteristic of its species, the snake shot forward, not toward the container, but along the edge of the enclosure. Devon reacted quickly, adjusting his hook to redirect the animal, but in doing so, he momentarily lowered his acrylic shield. It was all the opening the taipan needed. The snake launched itself upward with incredible precision, sailing past the hook and striking Devon's exposed wrist just below his protective glove. The fang sank deep, delivering a massive dose of venom before Devon could even register what had happened. The feeding schedule indicated the taipan was due for a meal, and Devon prepared accordingly, knowing that hungry snakes were often more aggressive. What happened next was pieced together from the scene discovered later. While manipulating the enclosure, Devon apparently misjudged the taipan's position. The snake, quick and agile despite its typically calm demeanor, evaded the hook and struck, sinking its fangs into Devon's wrist between his protective glove and sleeve. Following his emergency protocols, Devon attempted first aid, applying a pressure bandage to the bite site. He had been waiting for a specialized anti-venom delivery that had been delayed due to licensing requirements. Without this crucial antidote on hand, Devon's situation quickly became dire. The inland taipan's venom was primarily neurotoxic, but also contains powerful hemotoxins and myotoxins. Unlike the black mamba's fast-acting neurotoxins, the taipan's venom typically took longer to manifest severe symptoms, usually 2 to 6 hours without treatment. This gave victims a larger window for medical intervention, but once symptoms progressed, the outcome was equally fatal. His girlfriend, returning from shopping approximately 30 minutes after the bite occurred, found Devon collapsed on the floor of the snake room, already showing signs of envenomation. His breathing was labored and he was experiencing intense abdominal pain, early symptoms of taipan envenomation. She immediately called emergency services. The paramedics arrived within 12 minutes of the call, remarkably fast. But the taipan venom worked faster. The paramedics worked efficiently, establishing an IV, administering oxygen, and preparing him for immediate transport. They confirmed what Devon already knew. They didn't carry taipan antivenom. It would be waiting at the hospital, they assured him. Devon Blakely was pronounced dead at Gold Coast University Hospital approximately 3 hours after the bite. The taipan antivenom arrived by helicopter 20 minutes after his death, a cruel timing that haunted Melissa for years afterward. October 9, 2016 dawned with a brilliant African sunrise, casting golden rays across the vast expanse of Luangwa Valley. The air was thick with humidity, promising another scorching day in the Zambian wilderness. For Dr. Eileen Moravec, this weather was perfect, ideal conditions for the cold-blooded subjects of her research to emerge from their nighttime hideaways. At 39, Eileen had dedicated her entire adult life to understanding the world's most misunderstood creatures. Growing up in a small town outside of Boston, she'd been fascinated by reptiles since finding a garden snake at age 7. While other girls collected dolls, Eileen filled notebooks with sketches of snakes, lizards, and turtles. Her bedroom walls weren't covered with posters of boy bands, but with scientific illustrations of reptile anatomy and distribution maps of venomous species across continents. Her parents had hoped it was just a phase, but by 22, she had graduated with honors in zoology, and by 28, she had earned her doctorate with groundbreaking research on venom evolution in African elapids. The Luangwa Valley Project was her dream assignment, 3 months of field research tracking and documenting the behavior patterns of some of Africa's deadliest snakes. She'd been particularly focused on the black mamba, a species whose reputation for aggression she believed was largely misunderstood. Her preliminary findings suggested that these sleek, lightning-fast predators were actually quite shy and preferred retreat over confrontation when given the option. In the evening before her fatal encounter, Dr. Eileen Moravec had shared her insights with Marcus about black mambas. She passionately explained that these creatures weren't the mindless killers people imagined, but sophisticated predators with complex behaviors. She believed that better understanding these behaviors could save both snake and human lives. Marcus admired Eileen's passion, but worried about her tendency to take calculated risks. She was meticulous about safety protocols, always wearing the proper boots, carrying anti-venom in their field kit, keeping compression bandages at hand. But she also believed that to truly understand these animals, one had to observe them in their natural state, undisturbed and behaving naturally. That morning, Eileen had been particularly excited. Their motion sensor cameras had captured footage of a large black mamba using the same basking site 3 days in a row, a perfect opportunity to observe natural behavior patterns. She packed her field journal, camera, and observation equipment with the careful precision that characterized all her work. The black mamba was Africa's longest venomous snake, capable of reaching lengths of up to 14 feet, though most averaged around 8 feet. Despite their name, they weren't actually black. Their scales ranged from olive to grayish brown. The black referred to the inky color inside their mouths, which they displayed when threatened. What made them particularly dangerous was their combination of highly potent neurotoxic venom and speed, capable of moving up to 12.5 miles per hour in short bursts. Following established protocol, Eileen and Marcus approached the basking site together, maintaining visual contact at all times. The site was a small clearing with a fallen log that had been rotting for years, creating the perfect micro-habitat for a variety of creatures. Eileen knelt beside the log, her movements slow and deliberate, while Marcus remained close by with their field kit open and ready. After several minutes of careful observation, Eileen saw no signs of the mamba. Following standard field procedure, she used her snake hook to gently lift a section of loose bark on the log, probing cautiously before each movement. What happened next unfolded with terrifying speed. As Eileen carefully lifted the bark, Marcus, standing just a few feet away, caught a flash of movement so quick it seemed almost like a trick of light. The black mamba, concealed in a hollow beneath the bark, erupted from its hiding place with explosive force. The snake's sleek body launched upward like a coiled spring releasing, its head moving faster than the human eye could track. Its mouth gaped open, revealing the characteristic black interior that gave the species its name, a glimpse of darkness that would be the last thing many victims ever saw. The first strike caught Eileen on her forearm, just above her protective glove. The mamba's fangs, nearly a quarter-inch long, penetrated her skin with surgical precision, injecting venom directly into her tissue. Eileen gasped, more from surprise than immediate pain, and instinctively pulled back her arm. This defensive movement triggered the mamba's second strike. The snake, now fully in defensive mode, targeted the exposed skin at Eileen's waist, where her field shirt had risen slightly. The fang sank deep, delivering a second dose of neurotoxic venom that would prove fatal. Marcus lunged forward with his snake hook, but the mamba had already retreated back into the log's recesses, its attack complete in less than 2 seconds. Eileen remained kneeling. She looked down at her arm where 2 small puncture wounds were already beginning to weep tiny beads of blood. A similar pair of punctures marked her side. The venom began its work immediately, though the full effects wouldn't be apparent for several minutes. Black mamba venom contains potent neurotoxins that attack the nervous system, gradually shutting down neural pathways and eventually leading to respiratory paralysis. Unlike some venoms that cause immediate excruciating pain, mamba venom's initial subtlety belies its deadly efficiency. When the emergency struck, Marcus implemented their emergency protocol while Eileen, still conscious, guided her own first aid procedures. Her hands remained steady as she directed Marcus to apply the pressure bandages, her scientific mind still functioning with remarkable clarity despite knowing what was coming. Marcus contacted emergency services via satellite phone, which connected successfully. He administered their field anti-venom kit, standard procedure for researchers working with highly venomous species in remote locations. Despite these prompt measures, the double bite from a large mamba had delivered a massive venom dose. Within 30 minutes, Eileen began experiencing the progressive symptoms of mamba envenomation, tingling around the bite sites, followed by increasing difficulty swallowing and a heaviness in her limbs as the neurotoxins began affecting her nervous system. The emergency helicopter arrived 50 minutes after the bite, by which time Eileen was experiencing significant respiratory distress as the neurotoxins affected her diaphragm. The medical team administered additional antivenom and placed her on ventilator support, but the venom's effects were advancing rapidly through her system. Throughout the emergency flight to the regional hospital, Eileen remained conscious, although the neurotoxins were gradually paralyzing her respiratory muscles. Despite maximum medical intervention, including multiple doses of antivenom and medical ventilation, she succumbed to her respiratory failure approximately 4 hours after the bite. September 3, 2016 began with a gentle mist hanging over the rice paddies of Chiang Rai, Thailand. The early harvest season had brought the entire community to the fields, including 13-year-old Molly Ratanpong and her grandparents. Molly was the pride of her family, bright, hard-working, and unfailingly kind. Unlike many children her age who dreamed of escaping to Bangkok, Molly loved the rhythm of rural life. She excelled in school, particularly mathematics and science. Her teachers often told her parents she could earn a university scholarship if she continued her diligent work. This particular harvest had begun early due to concerns about approaching storms. The entire village had mobilized, with families working from dawn until dusk to bring in the crop that would sustain them through the coming year. As the sun began to disappear, Molly's grandparents called for her to stop her work, but she refused to. She wanted to continue, which her family agreed to, knowing she never got home late. Molly set down her basket of cut rice and headed toward the canal that separated their family's paddy from the neighboring field. The narrow waterway was lined with thick vegetation, a mix of tall grasses, bamboo, and tangled shrubs that provided habitat for the frogs, snakes, and small mammals that were part of the rice field ecosystem. As she approached the spot where she'd left her sickle, the fading light made it difficult to see clearly. Molly stepped carefully along the muddy bank, mindful of her footing on the slippery surface. She reached down to grab the sickle, her fingers just brushing the handle. What Molly couldn't see in the gathering dusk was the massive reticulated python that had been watching her approach. The 16-foot snake had been hiding in the thick brush along the canal, its patterned skin providing perfect camouflage among the shadows and vegetation. Reticulated pythons are among the world's longest snakes, capable of growing over 20 feet in length. Though primarily nocturnal, they hunt whenever opportunity presents itself. Their distinctive net-like pattern of scales creates perfect camouflage in dappled light, and their incredible strength allows them to subdue prey many times their weight. Unlike venomous snakes that kill with toxins, pythons kill by constriction, tightening their powerful muscles around the victim's chest each time they exhale, gradually preventing the lungs from expanding. Contrary to popular belief, pythons don't crush prey but rather cause death through cardiac arrest by preventing normal blood circulation. As Molly bent to retrieve her sickle, the python struck with explosive force. There was no warning, no rattle, no hiss, just the lightning-fast lunge of powerful muscles that had evolved over millions of years to capture prey. Molly, small for her age at just under 5 feet tall and weighing about 85 pounds, represented potential prey for the large python. In the dim twilight, the snake may have mistaken her for a smaller animal, or perhaps it was simply opportunistic. The snake's head hit Molly with such force that she was knocked off balance, falling backward into the muddy bank. Before she could scream, the python's body was wrapping around her torso, powerful coils tightening with each of Molly's panicked breaths. Her initial cry was cut short as the constriction forced air from her lungs. The python's grip tightened methodically, not crushing bones as commonly believed, but preventing Molly from drawing breath, slowly suffocating her while cutting off blood flow to her brain. With each heartbeat, the coils tightened further. Molly struggled desperately, her hands clawing at the muscular coils, her feet kicking at the muddy bank. But the python's strength was overwhelming, its grip implacable. The snake began dragging her toward the denser vegetation, an instinctual behavior when capturing prey. Back at the main field, Molly's grandparents finished packing their tools, assuming their granddaughter had already started walking home ahead of them. It wasn't until they returned to the village and spoke with the neighbors that they found out Molly had not returned home yet. The explanation sent a chill through him. Molly was never late, never irresponsible. Something was wrong. They immediately gathered flashlights and called neighbors. Within minutes, a search party had formed. Men and women from nearby homes armed with lights and calling Molly's name as they retraced the path from the rice fields. They reached the family's paddy and spread out, searching methodically. Molly's grandpa headed straight for the canal where his daughter had reportedly gone to retrieve her sickle. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the muddy bank. The sickle lay where Molly had spotted it, partially submerged in the mud at the water's edge. Nearby, the ground showed signs of a struggle: disturbed mud, flattened grass, and a single sandal that Molly's grandpa recognized as his granddaughter's. The search party converged on the spot, their lights scanning the area. One of the men, a former hunter named Chai, noticed the drag marks leading into the thick vegetation along the canal. With machetes, the men began cutting through the dense undergrowth, following the disturbed path. They had gone about 20 feet when Chai's flashlight illuminated a scene from a nightmare. The massive python lay coiled around Molly's motionless form. Unlike sensationalized stories, the snake had not yet begun to swallow her. Pythons typically wait hours after a kill before beginning to consume large prey. Instead, it remained tightly wrapped around her body, still applying pressure even though Molly had already succumbed to asphyxiation. Molly's grandpa's anguished cry echoed across the fields. The men rushed forward, machetes raised. The python, disturbed by the lights and noise, attempted to retreat deeper into the vegetation, still gripping its prey. Chai, acting on instinct and rage, brought the machete down on the snake's neck, severing its head with a single powerful stroke. The massive body continued to writhe and coil for several minutes, a reflex action that continued even after death. When they finally managed to unwrap the python's massive coils from Molly's body, it was clear she had been dead for at least an hour. Her face was peaceful, almost as if she were sleeping, but her lips had turned blue from lack of oxygen. News of the tragedy spread quickly through the province. By morning, local wildlife authorities had arrived to investigate, confirming that the python was 18 feet long. It was large but not exceptional for the species, which can reach over 20 feet in the wild. Experts noted that the snake was healthy and in its prime, likely having established a territory along the canal where small mammals came to drink. The incident sent shockwaves through the community. Farmers were advised to work in pairs and avoid the canal areas during dawn and dusk when pythons are most active. Wildlife biologists explain that such attacks were extremely rare. Reticulated pythons, despite their size, typically avoid humans and prefer natural prey like monkeys, pigs, and deer. The attack on Molly was an anomaly, a tragic intersection of human and animal territories in a changing landscape where agricultural development increasingly encroached on wildlife habitat. Molly's tragic death serves as a sobering reminder that even in areas where humans have cultivated the land for generations, wild predators still maintain territories and hunting patterns that occasionally intersect with human activity, often with devastating consequences. August 19, 2014 was a humid day in Ecuador's Esmeraldas province. The rainforest canopy dripped with moisture from an early morning shower, creating a symphony of water droplets hitting leaves. For Ramon Estevez, this was the perfect backdrop for his eco-tourism adventure. The 45-year-old Spanish accountant had always been drawn to wild places. His modest apartment back home was filled with souvenirs from his travels: a tribal mask from Papua New Guinea, a ceremonial knife from the Amazon, photographs of mountain summits from 4 continents. This 3-week journey through Ecuador's most biodiverse regions was a celebration of sorts. After 20 years of dedicated work, he had finally arranged a sabbatical year to pursue his dream of visiting the world's great wilderness areas. This particular morning, Ramon had joined a guided hike through a remote section of the Ecuadorian rainforest. The group consisted of Ramon, 2 other tourists, and their experienced local guide. They had been walking for nearly 3 hours, with the guide pointing out various medicinal plants and wildlife along the established trail. The guide had warned them about the dangers of the rainforest, including the South African bushmaster, locally known as Vuragosa or warty snake, due to its distinctive ridged scales. These vipers were masters of camouflage, with their brown and tan patterned bodies blending perfectly with the forest floor. Growing up to 12 feet long, bushmasters were the largest venomous snakes in the Americas and possess a potent hemotoxic venom that destroys tissue and prevents blood clotting. Around midday, the group paused near a small clearing. While the others rested, Ramon noticed a splash of color just off the trail, a rare orchid species he had been hoping to photograph. Without alerting the guide, he stepped carefully off the path, camera in hand, moving toward the base of a large ceiba tree where the orchids grew. Reaching the orchid, Ramon crouched down, adjusting his camera settings to capture the flower's intricate details. Satisfied with his photographs, Ramon prepared to return to the group. As he shifted his weight to stand, his boot disturbed a thick layer of leaf litter near the base of the tree. The South American bushmaster, Lachesis muta, had been perfectly camouflaged among the brown and tan leaf litter. At up to 12 feet long, the bushmaster is the largest pit viper in the Americas, with heat-sensing pits that allow it to detect warm-blooded prey with precision. Despite its size, its pattern of tan and brown scales creates perfect camouflage among fallen leaves. This snake was likely hunting for small mammals that frequented the area. Bushmasters are primarily nocturnal hunters, but this one had remained in its daytime resting spot rather than retreating to a burrow. The bushmaster, disturbed from its resting place, reacted defensively. Before Ramon could process what was happening, the viper struck, driving its fangs deep into his lower leg, just above his hiking boot. The pain was immediate and intense, like 2 hot needles being driven into his calf muscle. Ramon cried out, stumbling backward and falling against a tree trunk. The snake, having delivered its defensive strike, slithered rapidly away into the undergrowth. Ramon's shout alerted the guide, who was at his side within seconds, the rest of the group hanging back in horror. The guide immediately recognized the severity of the situation upon seeing the distinctive bushmaster retreating into the underbrush. Unlike some venomous snakes that deliver dry bites without venom, bushmasters typically injected large amounts of venom with each strike, an evolutionary adaptation for killing prey like rabbits and agwits. The guide applied a pressure bandage and instructed the other tourists to help carry Ramon back toward the trailhead where their boat was docked. Unlike the neurotoxic venoms of cobras or mambas that attack the nervous system, the Bushmaster's hemotoxic venom worked by destroying tissue and preventing blood from clotting, a slower but equally deadly mechanism. The effects of the venom manifested within 30 minutes. Ramon's leg had swollen dramatically, with bruising spreading upward from the bite site as blood vessels ruptured beneath the skin. By the 1 hour mark, he was disoriented and struggling to remain conscious as internal bleeding began. His blood pressure dropped dangerously as fluids leaked from his damaged blood vessels. Despite the guide's best effort to reach help quickly, Ramon's condition deteriorated with each passing hour. His breathing became labored and his pulse weakened as the venom circulated through his system. So they made the decision at that critical moment: get Ramon to the hospital as quick as possible. With all the strength they had, they assisted Ramon, carrying him shoulder to shoulder to the river where their only vehicle is located. By the 3 hour mark, they reached the river where their boat was docked. Ramon was barely responsive, his breathing shallow and irregular. Carlos immediately radioed ahead to the medical station, describing Ramon's symptoms and requesting that anti-venom be prepared. The boat journey downriver took another excruciating hour. By the time they reached the medical station, Ramon had lost consciousness completely. The rural clinic had basic anti-venom supplies, but not the specific Bushmaster anti-venom needed for optimal treatment. The doctor administered what they had available, a polyvalent antivenom designed to work against several pit viper species, while arranging emergency transport to a hospital in Esmeralda City. Despite the medical team's best efforts, Ramon Estevez was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. Ramon had succumbed to the venom's effects. The autopsy revealed extensive internal hemorrhaging and tissue necrosis consistent with Bushmaster envenomation. Local authorities used Ramon's case to emphasize the importance of staying on marked trails and always remaining within sight of guides when in snake territory. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.